This is KJ Singh, and you're listening to the KJ Singh Show. There are mainstream politicians out there clamoring to give cover for this G side, which include both the duopoly of the US and the UK. In the UK, we've got Labour and Conservative. In the US, we have got the Republicans and the Democrats. Essentially, both countries are one-party states on this particular issue of genocide, and they're all clamoring over each other to give cover for the G side. So, in other words, it's very important for us to vote green, if possible, at the next election. The only party that is giving the mildest amount of consideration for a ceasefire. I mean, it may not even give enough. It may not give enough, or rather, it may not be as empowering as ending the occupation in of itself, but it is better than the sheer genocidal complicity of our establishment countries. Now, whilst this, we have these mainstream politicians in the UK and US giving cover, in Germany, this is taken on a new level, where moral kind of backwardness, the moral bankruptcy is even more pronounced. So in the Berlinale Film Festival, I may have butchered that name, but it's a state-funded film festival, one of the three biggest film festivals in the world, or rather in Europe. And there was a film that won an award, a documentary film, and the Israeli Jewish director gave a few minutes to talk about the issues that Palestinians were facing in the West Bank, but Palestinians generally, because of the apartheid conditions in which Palestinians are under. And he also gave consideration, and he was working alongside his Palestinian co-director, and it's very beautiful to see this man of moral clarity, of conscience, talking about the very shared conditions which are very evident for everyone to see. And this man, being Jewish, was lambasted by the German officials, for being anti-Semitic. Now, make that make sense. This is an Israeli Jewish man who has the conscience to really point out what is happening, and he's being, criticized, being, essentially verbally cancelled, and as a result of this, you've got a whole host of officials in Germany calling him out for his anti-Semitism, and anyone who clapped for him in an audience are given some are being looked at under the microscope too, and this just goes to show the difference between the moralism that we see by the establishment and what is moral clarity. What do I mean by this? So, moralism, as is displayed by our politicians, the officials of Germany, in the most cartoonish way, for them, politics is a form of ethical dogmatism. It's a form of morality for them is about how they are perceived, and how they are perceived is dependent on the underlying, social and cultural education of the and what is perpetuated in society, in the media. And so therefore morality is about whether you can present yourself as moral in light of the paradigm, the media and the social classes, how you can be perceived. Moralism is about perception. If you can, one form of moralism is if you can say that you are morally superior and showcase that you're morally superior by conforming to whatever standards are present in the society, and or you can present somebody as morally inferior by presenting them as like some pariah, morally degenerative pariah. These people who are criticizing the state of Israel. How dare they? This is the only Jewish state. So this is moralism. This is ethical dogmatism, which is essentially is based on conformity. And moral clarity, however, sees the harm, sees and is about reducing the harm. So the Israeli Jewish director saw this, the oppression of the Palestinians, who are the oppressed class within this power dynamic, and he gave them a voice. He talked about ending this oppression. So he's reducing the harm. It's essentially what the left-wing Jews were doing when prior to the rise of the Third Reich. And they're the first ones to be attacked. In fact, in the Third Reich, they saw leftism, which essentially is humanitarianism or rule-based utilitarianism, which is about reducing harm, maximizing well-being, reducing harm. And this is not about conformity to ideology, but rather what is good for humans at, our Maslow hierarchy of needs level. Whether, humans have their basic needs met, whether they have the freedom to pursue their dreams. This is essentially leftism, whereas right-wing ideology, right-wing morality is about conforming to an ideal, conforming to whatever structures, political and media structures are in place, and conforming to it. And the more harder you conform to it, the more moral you are, according to these systems. And moral clarity, of course, is harder to come by because it is kind of like sometimes being subversive, sometimes questioning the system, which doesn't necessarily give you good coverage. You may make enemies whilst you're really going against the grain. And this is what happened to Norman Finkelstein. Norman Finkelstein was very much made a pariah for simply having the moral courage to go against the system and whatever. And it's not just the fact that he spoke for Palestinians. He also bruised the egos of people who are propagating these more kind of like racist ideologies. These people who are very powerful people. Alan Dershowitz. These are people who should be behind bars, but they're not. And so he was against the grain, and so he was made a pariah. He was cut out of the system. He was denigrated. He was lied about. He was smeared. He was slandered. He was libeled, and he wasn't able to maintain a consistent job because of the fact that he's blacklisted amongst the academic directories. And so he is one example of many who had the moral courage, moral clarity, and was cancelled to oblivion. Talking about smears and trying to cancel. So yesterday I did a video on Aaron Bushnell, who self-immolated himself in the supreme form of protest and sadly died. He was at the age of 25, but a man of great moral courage and emotional maturity. This is I'm not saying that we should follow his lead, because of course that was the conclusion that he came to, but it's not something it's something the reason why it's getting so much coverage is because it is very extreme, and detractors, people who want to obfuscate his motives, are talking about his mental health issues. For example, there is a tweet by somebody with a Palestinian flag as his profile, obvious Zionist kind of like Ziontologist kind of propaganda. This is it's so clear to see when somebody's trying to portray themselves as this Palestinian, everyman, but really goes against the very self-determination, the very existence of the Palestinian people. You have to question where they're coming from. And so, you got the tweets like that, and then one thing that really pissed me off, and would piss anyone off, is that there are literally mocked up screenshot of him saying the most heinous, most racist things, and it's a mock-up because, of course, you can look at the archives, you can go through the archives, as I have done. I spent a couple hours looking through the archives and looking for his comments on this, highly racist thing that he was purported to have said, and I couldn't find it. And so people are lying about it to smear. Just imagine the moral depravity to smear and slander a man who cannot defend himself. He no longer exists on this planet, and people really want to denigrate his image, who want to obfuscate the motives, and they want to slander his name. Imagine like the kind of moral decay you have to be in, the kind of mindset you have to be in. I don't think these people believe. A lot of these people believe in a God. I don't think they believe in karma. I think a lot of these people are psychopathic. I think these people care more about power and grifting, and aligning themselves with an ideology, political ideology, whether it's Scientology or it's just the right wing. These people are going to just align themselves with whatever. And Ollie London, of course, is one of these examples. Ollie London, a man who got plastic surgery because he felt like he wanted to identify as Korean, and he used this to grift off the fervent and transphobia in society, because as if wanting to change your race is the same as having transgender identity, when transgenderism has been in existence for human societies for at least 8,000 years, many thousands and thousands of years. It seems to be part of our evolutionary history, in the same way that homosexuality is. There are different theories to try and explain this, but it seems to be part of our human history, and it's so strong, it's so powerfully important to a lot of people. When I mean a lot of people, I'm not talking about. This is still a significantly small proportion of people as part of the population, but there's still a lot of people for something that it doesn't really get a lot of visibility on our media, but does get a lot of visibility for the political culture wars very recently. I remember a kind of a entertainment talk show in the UK in the 80s or 90s, where they talked about talked to somebody who was forgot the name, but I think Barrymore, Barrymore. But essentially there was a transgender person on the show, and they were all they're all in agreement that this person deserves the rights of anyone else, because as the adage goes, live and let live. It's a very common sense argument. However, because the right wing doesn't actually believe in anything meaningful, substantial, they're not based on harm reduction, they're not based on utilitarian principles, they're based on a conformity to traditional ideology, traditional religion, and traditional stereotypes that they anything that seems new that appears, or something that has been unearthed, um, that appears, is ripe for just meat. This is fresh meat for these psychopaths, and there's a large degree of psychopathy amongst the right wing because, of course, if you want to feel powerful, the easiest thing to do is to punch down on the marginalized, punch down on people who don't have a lot of power, and so this is ripe, ripe for the right wing. This is ripe for their own obsession, their own fascination with punching down on the oppressed, because, of course, they see life as a series of tribal agreements. Anyway, they don't see common humanity. They see one tribe, a centralized identity, and another tribe with their own essentialized, their own innate natures, which are fundamentally different from you and I. And this just goes to show a lack of emotional awareness, a lack of emotional maturity, a lack of understanding of what's going on in the world. And of course, we had J.K. Rowling very recently, of course, beat the drum of transphobia with the response to a transgender woman who committed some heinous acts of violence, and and responding to it with not our crimes, as in not it's not this trans woman is not us women, and it's really this is a psychopathic element to it, because like, what proportion of transgender people are committing crimes? It's marginal. It's incredibly tiny proportion of people, and yet you're beating this drum that is going to cause more problems for transgender people down the line. And it's exploitative. There's a way to go about it. If you want to discuss, let's say, trans women going to women's prisons, you need to, instead of like going at it in a very volatile, very just explosive and non-nuanced way, it really speaks to the right wing, essentially, when you do go at it in this way, in this highly volatile, highly lacking in compassion to the people who are at the mercy of this, propaganda. Because remember, Breonna Gray. Sorry, I must be get that name wrong, but this trans woman, or trans girl, who was unalived for simply being of transgender identity, and I think it's a consequence of the transphobic kind of arena in which we exist. Our political, the political right wing is almost like significant part of it is transphobia. That's the platform on which they are standing on. It's transphobia, but also Islamophobia, and it's always the other, because if you are, if we were to go back to 1940s, the so-called other would be Jews, but it's always relative to the majority. So Muslims, transgender people, they're a little bit more different than whoever is closer, like Jewish people. They're a little bit more different, so they're the new scapegoats. And let's say aliens would kind of arrive to Earth. They would then therefore be seen as the new scapegoat. They would be seen as these people. Even if these aliens were like capable of empathy and were really peace loving, it's all about relative distance to the mainstream population, the mainstream conglomerate of people. In this case, is white, white middle class, and so this also is being exploited by J.K. Rowling and people like her. And it's interesting because J.K. Rowling was one of the first people to exploit the now debunked, the highly refuted claim that there were 40 beheaded babies, or rather, an associate of hers was pushing out this propaganda. And it seems to me that like she operates from a very traditional white feminist way, and white feminist, almost Western supremacist way of looking at the world. And this is very traditionalist, conservative way of operating, because society is always going to be changing. Society is always flowing and changing, and you cannot constantly focus on whatever's different, whatever it seems different, rather than seeing the common ground that we all share. Transphobia is cut from the same cloth as Islamophobia, because about othering whatever seems different relative to the mainstream population. Anyways, there's so much more to discuss on this. Please like, comment, and subscribe. That'd be very much appreciated.